Imagine spending 20 million rupees on military-grade cybersecurity. Like, you've got the next-generation firewall, secure web gateways, zero-trust network architecture, the whole works.
Right, the entire defensive playbook.
Exactly. You've got endpoint detection agents running on every single corporate laptop, so you feel secure, your board of directors feels secure. But what you don't know, and this is the terrifying part, is that your entire corporate database is actively being bypassed right this second.
Yeah, and not by a sophisticated hacker group.
No, by a marketing intern in Nagpur using a free Zapier account just to make their, their afternoon spreadsheet task a little bit easier. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are looking at a threat landscape that fundamentally breaks everything we thought we knew about enterprise security perimeters.
It really does. We are taking you into the completely invisible, entirely unregulated world of shadow pipelines. And it is arguably the single most pervasive blind spot in enterprise architecture today.
It really is. And we're pulling this apart using some phenomenal high-signal technical analysis from deep tech analyst Prasad Bond.
Yeah, his research is critical. What makes his work so vital here is that he completely ignores the theoretical marketing fluff of cybersecurity vendors. He just throws it out.
Which is so refreshing.
Exactly. He looks exclusively at the physical engineering realities, like how is the data actually moving right now?
And for you listening, the stakes for understanding this could not be higher. We are not just talking about, poor data hygiene or a messy IT closet. We are talking about massive catastrophic regulatory fines waiting for you under India's Digital Personal Data Protection Act, the DPDP Act.
Right. The financial ruin aspect of this is very real.
It's the hammer hanging over everyone's head. So our mission today is to give you a comprehensive understanding of how everyday, entirely mundane low-code and no-code tools, the exact platforms your revenue and marketing teams are using every single day, have rendered traditional firewalls practically useless.
But we aren't just here to admire the problem, right? We're going to fix it.
Yes, exactly. We are going to walk you through the exact programmatic steps you must take to audit your environments, hunt down these rogue connections, and this is the most important part for the CISOs listening, mathematically prove the return on investment to your board when you sever these illegal data flows.
The contrast here is what really demands our attention at the start. There is this incredibly outdated perception of what enterprise security actually deals with on a day-to-day basis.
Like fixing the office Wi-Fi printer.
Exactly, yeah. Or provisioning laptops or resetting passwords. But the reality of a modern operator's day is frantically trying to prevent non-technical staff from silently piping highly confidential corporate databases into unvetted third-party AI summarizers.
Just because they didn't want to read a long document themselves.
Exactly. The fundamental architecture of data movement has shifted entirely under our feet. We are no longer dealing with data traveling from a lockdown server across a monitored network cable to a managed device. We are entirely in the realm of cloud-to-cloud movement.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to make sure we visualize exactly what that cloud-to-cloud movement means for the operator. Think about your traditional endpoint security. I always picture it as massive bank vault.
Right, I like that analogy.
You've got the 10-ton steel door, laser tripwires, biometric scanners, armed guards outside. That's your Palo Alto inline proxy. That's your IBM Moz 360 mobile threat defense. It feels impenetrable because you've spent a fortune on it.
A literal fortune, yeah.
But what's actually happening is that your own bank tellers, who are just trying to serve customers faster, they aren't trying to rob the bank, they have quietly drilled a hole in the floor of the vault. They've attached this invisible pneumatic tube and routed it straight into their living rooms.
That's exactly it. The 10-ton steel door is still locked tight, but it's guarding a completely empty hallway.
The data isn't traversing your network at all. It's talking API to API, server to server, entirely in the cloud.
That is the architectural reality we live in now. Because this traffic moves directly between cloud servers. So, for example, directly from your enterprise Salesforce environment over to a third-party automation platform like Make.com, it never intersects with your network perimeter.
It literally physically can't.
Right. Your network security appliances physically cannot inspect packets that never route through them.
Okay, so before we can even begin to talk about how an operator builds the technical kill switch for this, which we will get to, we need to understand the anatomy of the pipelines that these non-technical teams are building right under our noses. Let's look at the architecture of the shadow pipeline. because we aren't talking about a sophisticated nation-state hacker writing zero-day exploits in a basement.
Not at all. We are talking about your marketing specialists, your revenue operations professionals, your HR coordinators.
People who have never opened a command line in their life.
Exactly. And they are not acting with malicious intent. They are not trying to exfiltrate data to sell on the dark web. They are dealing with the daily grinding friction of enterprise software that requires massive amounts of manual data entry.
Right. Let's look at a highly realistic scenario. Let's go back to that marketing specialist in Nagpur. They receive a list of, say, 500 high-value leads via email from a recent conference. They are explicitly mandated by their boss to input that data into the corporate Salesforce instance.
A classic tedious task.
Very tedious. But they also want that exact same data in their personal Notion workspace because maybe they track their own performance metrics there, or maybe they want to run it through an external AI tool to draft personalized outreach emails. Doing all of that manually takes hours of copying, pasting, and formatting.
So they naturally look for a shortcut.
Yeah.
And the modern internet is fundamentally designed to provide those shortcuts.
Right.
We're talking about the explosion of low-code, no-code platforms. You'll hear it abbreviated as LCNC.
Right. Tools like Zapier, Make.com, Microsoft Power Automate, Tray.io.
Yes. These platforms are incredibly powerful and very intuitive. They empower everyday, non-technical employees to act as what the industry dubs citizen developers.
Yeah.
And the primary mechanism they use to achieve this automation is the webhook.
I think most operators listening know what a webhook is, but just to frame it in this specific context, the problem isn't the webhook itself. The problem is that these citizen developers are spinning up active authenticated webhooks entirely server-side.
Right.
They are basically setting up a permanent instruction that says, whenever a new lead is created in Salesforce, automatically push that entire data payload to this external public URL.
Precisely. They construct an active webhook linking a secure enterprise-grade SaaS database directly to an unvetted external endpoint. And they might pipe employee names, financial drafts, or highly regulated customer data right out of the secure environment.
Just flowing freely.
Yep. And again, this transfer happens entirely server to server. It flows from the Salesforce cloud directly to the Zapier cloud and then out to whatever final destination they configured.
And traditional security tools are just completely blind to this. If you are relying on, say, mobile threat defense, it registers 0 anomalies because the mobile device isn't actually involved in the data transfer at all.
No, it's just the device they use to set up the rule.
Exactly. And your secure web gateways fail to inspect the traffic because the packets are moving thousands of miles outside your inspected network perimeter.
It creates a severe structural vulnerability that many security teams simply refuse to acknowledge, mostly because they can't see it on their standard dashboards.
Oh.
But if we look at the OAuth CI/CD Top 10...
Wait, for anyone who isn't familiar, OAuth.
The Open Web Application Security Project. It's the definitive list of critical security risks in continuous integration and delivery environments. If you look at their list, we find risk TICD SEC 8.
Okay, and what does SEC 8 cover?
It specifically highlights the ungoverned usage of third-party services. The optimization of workflows by employees directly creates a massive, ungoverned attack surface.
Help me understand the scale of that attack surface, though, because a skeptic might listen to this and think, sure, the data moves cloud to cloud, but the employee still had to log in to set it up. There's still an authentication layer protecting the core database, right?
And that brings us to the token problem, which is really the absolute heart of the technical failure in this entire ecosystem. When a user authorizes an application like Zapier to connect to your corporate Salesforce, they aren't just logging in for a one-time session. They are navigating an OAuth 2.0 flow.
Okay. And the end result of that flow is an OAuth token, which is basically a digital VIP pass.
Exactly. Organizations routinely grant extreme privileges to these LCNC applications via these OAuth integrations without a second thought. I mean, when a user clicks accept on that blue permission screen, they rarely understand the technical implications or the access scopes they are actually approving.
They just want the green check mark so they can go to lunch.
Right. But a simple webhook, configured to synchronize new customer records, often demands broad read and write access to the entire database just to function. The LCNC platform now holds a token that fundamentally says, I am permanently allowed to act on behalf of this employee.
Wait, I have to stop you there. Access tokens expire. That's a foundational principle of modern authentication. If I log into my corporate banking app, it kicks me out after 15 minutes of inactivity. Surely these enterprise platforms are expiring these tokens, which would drastically limit the window of vulnerability.
That is the theoretical protection, and it's a massive misconception in the industry. Yes, the specific access token has a short lifespan, maybe an hour, maybe less. The idea is that if an attacker intercepts an access token, they possess a very narrow window for exploitation.
Right.
But in the real world of API integrations, this protection completely fails. Why? Because access tokens arise paired with refresh tokens.
Refresh token?
Yes. The refresh token's entire job is to automatically silently request a brand new access token from the authorization server the very moment the old one expires.
So it just re-ups the access behind the scenes?
It extends access indefinitely. Vendors design it this way for user experience. Because if you had to re-authenticate Zapier every single hour, the product would be completely unusable.
Nobody would use it.
Right. But from a security standpoint, once that initial connection is made, an token compromised during a third-party vendor breach functions exactly like a master key.
Because it never asks for a second factor.
Exactly. It requires no secondary authentication challenge. The API server will never prompt the compromised third-party application for an MFA code.
I really want to make sure the gravity of this lands for the listener. If that third-party vendor, let's say it's a tiny 5-person startup that built a really cool AI scheduling app, and your HR team connected that app to your corporate directory. If that tiny startup gets breached by a ransomware gang,
then your corporate directory is completely compromised. The token gives the attacker permanent, silent, authenticated access to your systems. It bypasses all your expensive MFA and network firewalls. And we don't have to speak in hypotheticals here. We saw this exact scenario play out with the SalesLoft and Drift incident.
Oh man, yeah.
It is the absolute textbook case study of API credential abuse and the compounding blast radius of shadow pipelines.
I remember when that hit the news, but the underlying mechanics were rarely explained well in the press. What exactly happened there technically?
So it started with a single compromised API credential. SalesLoft and Drift are both massive platforms in the sales engagement and conversational marketing space. Because these platforms deeply integrate with their customers' CRM systems like Salesforce or HubSpot, they hold thousands and thousands of highly privileged OAuth tokens.
Because every customer linked their accounts.
Right, so when a vulnerability in the integration layer was exploited, it didn't just affect one company's database.
Because the platforms are interconnected. The attacker didn't have to breach hundreds of individual corporate firewalls. They just breached the hub.
Exactly. The single compromised credential allowed the blast radius to multiply instantly, encompassing more than 700 companies.
700?
Yes. The attackers simply rode the trusted API connections, those OAuth tokens we just talked about, straight into the customer environments. The customer companies had perfect perimeter security, but because they had granted permanent API access to a third-party vendor that was compromised, their data was entirely exposed.
That is staggering. 700 companies breached because of the trust they placed in a single API connection. Okay, but let me play devil's advocate for a moment here. Because Microsoft is arguably the largest enterprise security vendor on the planet. They own the entire operating system, the email server, the identity provider, the productivity suite. Doesn't Microsoft 365 have built-in data loss prevention DLP designed to stop exactly this?
That is a very logical assumption.
Right. If I'm an operator, why can't I just go into my admin console, flip a switch that says block Zapier, and go home early?
I wish it were that simple. But the reality of how easily these default platform policies are bypassed by everyday, completely non-technical users is shocking. We need to deep dive into the failure of default defenses, specifically looking at the architectural flaws within the Microsoft Power Platform.
Let's really dig into this, because you're telling me a motivated marketer who doesn't know how to code can accidentally bypass enterprise-grade data loss prevention built by a multi-trillion-dollar company.
Absolutely. So Microsoft's DLP policies do attempt to block unauthorized connections. The core philosophy of their DLP is isolating business connectors from non-business connectors.
Which sounds reasonable.
The theory is perfectly sound. You create a policy that says internal data from SharePoint or Outlook cannot interact with external non-business connectors like Twitter or personal Dropbox accounts.
Right, keep church and state separate.
Exactly. But Zenity, they are a leader in application security posture management. They released some phenomenal threat research that thoroughly dissects the severity of the structural flaws within these environments. Users easily bypass these restrictions, and not through elite hacking, but through fully documented structural behaviors of the platform itself. There are 5 specific evasion methods we need to break down.
All right, I'm taking notes. Walk me through method 1. Let's say I'm an operator, I realize the danger of these shadow pipelines today, and I roll out a strict, uncompromising new DLP policy across my entire organization right now. Am I safe?
You are not.
Why?
Method 1 is what Zenity classifies as enforcement failure on existing resources. When you apply that new policy, you naturally assume it blankets the entire environment, right?
Yeah, of course. I just push the policy.
But within Microsoft's architecture, editing or updating a flow is what actually triggers the DLP policy evaluation.
Wait, are you saying it doesn't retroactively scan and shut down what's already running?
That is exactly what I am saying.
You have got to be kidding me.
No. If an employee set up a rogue webhook 6 months ago that pipes financial drafts from an internal SharePoint site to an external server, and you implement a strict block policy today, that old pipeline just keeps running. The legacy data pipelines are effectively grandfathered in. They remain completely active, completely ignoring the strict policy updates until someone manually goes in and tries to edit them. The enforcement fails entirely on pre-existing resources.
Why on earth would Microsoft design it that way? That sounds like a massive oversight.
It's an operational trade-off. Microsoft prioritizes business continuity over strict security isolation. If a new DLP policy immediately severed thousands of active, undocumented business workflows across a global enterprise,
The IT help desk would literally melt down.
the resulting operational chaos would be blamed on Microsoft. So they err on the side of not breaking existing processes, which inherently leaves a gaping security hole.
Okay, wow. So a smart operator has to manually hunt down the legacy flows. But let's say I do that. I do the hard work, I clean up the old stuff, and my new DLP policy explicitly blocks all known LCNC domains. I block Zapier, I block make.com. What is method 2?
Method 2 is HTTP call evasion. Sometimes a specific external service or domain is explicitly filtered and blocked by the DLP.
Like we just said, yeah.
But an employee doesn't need to use the convenient, colorful native connector for that blocked service. They can simply use a generic, basic HTTP connector to reach those blocked endpoints via direct REST calls.
So instead of dragging and dropping a button that says send to the blocked app, they drag in a generic web protocol block, manually type in the destination using environment variables, and hit send.
Correct. By using environment variables to obfuscate the destination URL, they bypass the domain filtering entirely.
Sneaky.
Very. They exfiltrate data to restricted services using basic web protocols that the DLP engine simply waves through because it can't decipher the final destination as a documented threat.
That brings us to method 3, which is fascinating. Custom connector abuse. How does that work?
Well, LCNC platforms are designed to be highly extensible. They allow users, often referred to as makers in this ecosystem, to build custom connectors if a native one doesn't exist for a particular service. So if an API is blocked by the DLP, a maker can simply build a custom connector that wraps the API of the blocked service.
I love trying to visualize this. It's essentially data money laundering.
This is a highly accurate analogy.
Right. The DLP engine is acting like a bank teller looking at the immediate depositor, which is the custom connector. The custom connector looks perfectly legitimate. It has a clean name. It's built internally. The DLP engine has no idea that the custom connector is instantly forwarding that data to a sanctioned offshore account, or in this case, a blocked external API.
Exactly. The DLP engine fails to recognize the underlying destination because it only evaluates the immediate, seemingly benign custom connector wrapper. As a security administrator, you completely lose visibility into the ultimate destination targets for your internal data. And again, this doesn't require malicious intent.
Right. They're just trying to work.
An employee might just find a tutorial online that says, hey, if the native connector isn't working, just wrap the API like this, and suddenly your entire enterprise data perimeter is compromised.
Method 4 is one that I think operators struggle with the most because it involves tools you fundamentally cannot turn off. Unblockable core connectors.
Yes. Microsoft hardcode specific connectors, most notably SharePoint and OneDrive, as unblockable.
Well, the rationale there is obvious. These services are the absolute core of the Microsoft 365 experience. If you disable the SharePoint connector, you essentially break the collaborative functionality of the entire platform. Your company stops working.
Right, an enterprise cannot function without SharePoint. So while you can't block the connector, users can utilize it to configure public, anonymous sharing links.
Oh, no.
Yes. An automated flow could be designed to take confidential internal documents, move them to a specific SharePoint folder, and automatically generate a public URL that requires no authentication to view.
So the confidential documents face immediate public exposure without any administrative intervention.
And the DLP engine is powerless to stop the flow because the SharePoint connector itself is whitelisted by default.
It's literally using the platform's own core functionality against it. And the final bypass, method 5.
Parent-child flow execution.
Yeah.
This is a structural blind spot in the execution engine itself. Makers use this to mix secure data with unsecured external endpoints seamlessly. A user creates a parent flow that handles all the sensitive, highly regulated business data. Then, they create a separate child flow that contains all the non-business, external, unvetted connectors. The parent flow executes, processes the data, and then simply calls the child flow, handing the data payload over.
And let me guess, the execution engine only evaluates the parent flow.
Exactly. The execution engine fails to trigger the combination block. It scans the parent flow, sees no external connectors, and deems it safe. It completely misses the fact that the parent is instantly handing the data off to an unsecured child flow.
That is wild.
The overarching lesson across all 5 of these methods is that native platform controls are architected for operational flexibility and user productivity. They are emphatically not designed for strict data isolation or robust security governance.
If I'm an operator listening to this, I'm realizing my native tools are essentially Swiss cheese. The firewall is blind because the traffic is cloud to cloud. The native DLP is broken because of structural evasion methods. So we require external governance mechanisms.
Yes, absolutely.
But I want to pivot here because to get budget for external governance tools, we have to talk about real-world consequences. If the native tools are this broken, what happens when, not if, but when a breach actually occurs? Who is legally left holding the bag here?
This is where the conversation shifts from technical theory to existential business risk. We must focus heavily on the legal risks and penalties under India's Digital Personal Data Protection Act of 2023.
The DPDP Act.
Yes. If your organization operates in this space or processes the personal data of citizens in this region, this is the most critical part of our entire discussion today. The DPDP Act is no longer a theoretical framework. It is transitioning into a period of aggressive, uncompromising enforcement. And there is a looming deadline that organizations must prepare for, the Phase 2 compliance deadline of November 2026.
Let's tie the DPDP Act directly back to our shadow pipelines. Under Section 8, Subsection 5 of the Act, organizations that process data are legally classified as data fiduciaries.
Correct.
And the law explicitly states that a data fiduciary must implement reasonable security safeguards.
And this is exactly where the shadow pipeline transforms from an IT headache into a lethal legal liability. When your marketing intern connects a corporate Workday instance to an AI summarizer via an LCNC platform, the organization fundamentally violates the DPDP Act.
Because the data fiduciary, your company, has lost control of the personal data. The unvetted AI platform is now processing that information without any explicit consent from the data principal, which is the user.
Right. And as the source material emphatically states, ignorance of a shadow pipeline offers absolutely no legal defense.
You cannot walk into a tribunal and say, oh, we didn't know the intern set up a Zapier hook.
No, that is not going to hold up in front of the Data Protection Board of India. They possess the absolute statutory authority to levy immense company-ending fines for these precise security failures. We are seeing vast volumes of user data processed in massive tech hubs, places like Pune or Nagpur's Mihan IT Park.
The scale of data processing in these regions is staggering.
Exactly. A single unregulated webhook buried deep inside one of those environments triggers immediate massive liability. Let's break down the exact maximum penalty exposure because operators need to memorize these numbers.
Yes, let's go through the schedule of fines because they are terrifying.
Under Schedule, Item 1 of the Act, the failure to implement reasonable security safeguards, which perfectly describes allowing shadow pipelines to exist, carries a maximum penalty exposure of up to 250 crore.
250 crore rupees, just for having the ungoverned pipeline even before a breach necessarily happens.
Exactly, and the penalties compound rapidly. Under Schedule Item 2, the failure to notify the board or the data principals of a personal data breach carries an additional penalty of up to 200 crore.
Wait, so if that external AI summarizer your employee used gets breached and your customer data was piped there, you are liable for failing to report it.
Yes, because you didn't even know it was there to report it. Furthermore, under Section 9, a breach of obligations regarding children's data adds another 200 crore. And under Section 6, simply processing personal data without valid, verifiable consent is up to 200 crore.
I want to pause and synthesize what this actually means for a chief information security officer. It means your capital allocation is entirely dangerously misaligned.
Very misaligned.
You are spending millions of dollars securing employee laptops, installing next-gen antivirus, configuring complex VPNs, and conducting these elaborate phishing simulations. But the authorization layer, the digital guest list granting permanent API access to third-party servers, is left wide open.
The CISO genuinely believes the corporate network remains secure. Meanwhile, a sales representative is simultaneously sending active customer records to a personal Gmail account using an automated trigger.
It is the definition of a false sense of security.
Yeah.
So how do we actually stop this? How do operators avoid these massive financial fines and secure their environments?
To avoid these catastrophic fines, you must fundamentally shift your defensive posture. You have to move your attention away from the physical network perimeter and focus directly on the API authorization layer.
We need to go to the source.
Yes, you must secure this environment at the API registry layer. You need a lean, programmatic audit mechanism that connects directly to the OAuth token registries of your major enterprise platforms.
And thankfully, our source material from Prasad Bond doesn't just outline the problem, it provides the exact technical handbook for solving it.
It's a fantastic resource.
I want to spend a significant amount of time right here. Let's get deeply into the weeds and provide a technical checklist for auditing OAuth token registries and API permissions. If I'm a developer or an engineer listening right now, what is my exact step-by-step playbook?
Let's detail the exact REST API calls necessary for identifying rogue app permissions, and list the specific metadata fields needed for audit verification. The audit engine you build needs to query active permission grants and scan for rogue webhook subscriptions. We will start with Salesforce execution.
Okay, Salesforce. How do we extract this registry of trust from Salesforce? Because I know Salesforce abstracts a lot of its underlying database.
It does. The audit engine must execute SOQL queries.
SOQL, like SQL, but for Salesforce?
Exactly, Salesforce Object Query Language. You run these queries against the OAuth token object. You execute this via their REST API. Unlike a standard SQL database where you might just run a simple select statement, SOQL is required to specifically ask the Salesforce engine to peel back the layer of connected applications.
Got it.
And because enterprise environments are massive, the query format requires strict batch processing logic to accommodate Salesforce's API rate limits. You can't just pull it all at once or you'll get blocked.
Yeah, okay, so we hit that OAuth token object. What specific metadata fields are we pulling back to verify the audit? We can't just look at a list of random token strings.
Correct. The token string itself is useless for an audit. You need to pull two critical metadata fields, the app name and the use count.
App name makes sense.
Right. The app name is your first indicator of compromise. It tells you exactly what third-party service holds the token. Is the app name official Workday integration, which is fine, or is it Bob's free PDF converter?
Which is a massive red flag.
Exactly. And the use count field is equally vital. It shows you exactly how actively the token is being utilized. Is it dormant, or is it firing thousands of times a day? The goal here is to identify rogue-connected apps operating entirely without administrative oversight.
Okay, that covers Salesforce. What about Microsoft? The entire corporate identity usually lives in Azure, or what they now call Microsoft Entra. How do we inspect Microsoft Entra?
For Microsoft Entra inspection, the auditor needs to query the Microsoft Graph API. The Graph API is Microsoft's unified endpoint for accessing data across their entire ecosystem. The exact endpoint you must target with a GT request is Service Principals OAuth 2 permission grants.
Service Principals OAuth 2 permission grants. Okay, so we hit that endpoint. What does the JSON payload look like, and what are we searching for within it?
The payload reveals every single delegated permission grant authorizing external access. It is the definitive list of who has the keys to the kingdom. The critical step for the auditor is to parse this payload and flag grants containing specific high-risk access scopes. For instance, you must actively hunt for the directory. Read-write all scope.
Let's explain why that specific scope is so terrifying. Directory.readWrite all means what exactly?
It means exactly what it says. Any external application holding a token with that scope has the ability to read every single user profile, group, and organizational contact in your entire directory. And more dangerously, it has the ability to write or alter that data.
So if that scope is issued to a non-essential, unvetted application, like a free calendar widget an employee downloaded, you have a massive critical vulnerability.
It is an utterly unacceptable level of access for an unvetted service.
All right, let's cover the third major pillar of enterprise IT, Google Workspace. How do we audit Google?
The system must interface with the admin SDK directory API. The audit engine needs to hit the tokens.list endpoint. This is done using a GET request specifically directed to the URL https://admin.google.com admin directory v1 users user key tokens.
And what does that GET request pull back for the auditor?
It retrieves a comprehensive list of all access tokens issued to third-party applications for that specific user key. Once you iterate through all users and aggregate that list, your algorithm needs to isolate anomalous tokens.
Let me step in to synthesize this for a second. What we are doing here with these API calls executing SOQL against the OAuth token object, querying the graph API for permission grants, calling the tokens.list endpoint, this checklist acts like a digital X-ray vision tool.
Yeah.
We are completely ignoring the network. We aren't looking at firewalls. We aren't sniffing packets. We aren't looking at the flow of traffic at all. We're looking directly at the guest list of who holds permanent authenticated VIP passes to the corporate data.
That is the perfect way to conceptualize it. You are auditing the registry of trust. You are looking at who the system explicitly trusts, regardless of where they are logging in from.
But there is a practical challenge here. If you run this audit at a Fortune 500 company or even a mid-sized enterprise, it might return 50,000 active tokens.
Easily.
An operator can't manually review 50,000 JSON payloads. We need to detail step-by-step methods to categorize and isolate high-risk third-party application connections based on DPDP risk levels. Give me a guide for prioritizing these audit targets.
Absolutely. Triaging the audit results is where the actual security work happens. You must implement a programmatic prioritization matrix. First, prioritize tokens holding excessive access scopes, like the directory.readWrite, all scope we just discussed. Any token with write access to core systems is an immediate Tier 1 threat.
Makes sense. Start with the highest privileges.
Second, map the tokens to the underlying data stores. You must prioritize any token connected to databases that house highly regulated personal data.
Right, because of the DPDP Act.
Exactly. If a token has access to a Salesforce instance containing patient health records or a financial database containing billing information, it moves to the absolute top of the queue. Because under the DPDP Act, the exposure of that specific classification of data triggers the highest tier of penalties.
And the third prioritization metric.
Isolate tokens lacking recent activity. If your audit reveals a token that was issued 2 years ago, has zero recent activity in the use count field, but still possesses high-level access rights, that is an unmonitored backdoor.
It provides zero business value but carries infinite risk.
Exactly. It must be flagged for immediate review.
But detection without remediation holds zero value. Once the audit highlights a high-risk, unvetted pipeline, let's say we find a dormant token with read access to our HR database connected to an abandoned startup's app. The operator must act instantly. We can't file a ticket and wait for a committee to review it next Tuesday.
No, absolutely not.
We need to sever the flow. Outline the specific programmatic logic used to safely automate OAuth token revocation and disable rogue webhooks.
This is where we apply Prasad Bond's philosophy of restorative engineering.
Restorative engineering, I like that.
It means technology must be leveraged to instantly restore control to the operator. The core principle of the automated kill switch is simple but devastatingly effective. You send an immediate delete request to the host API. You don't try to block the network traffic. You destroy the underlying authorization that allows the traffic to exist in the first place.
I want to write a technical handbook for developers on identifying and disabling these rogue webhooks right now. Let's look at the specific logic for the major platforms. Let's start with make.com. If our audit flags an unauthorized pipeline there, how do we kill it programmatically?
If an unauthorized make.com scenario is found processing sensitive data, the programmatic logic dictates transmitting a PAPCH request directly to the endpoint scenarioid. Within the payload of that PACH request, you set the active status to false. This action deactivates the flow entirely. The pipeline is shut down.
It just turns it off. But what about data that might be stuck in transit? If a webhook fired right before we sent the PATCH request, the data might be sitting in a queue waiting to be processed.
That is a critical operational detail. To clear accumulated webhooks that are sitting in a queue awaiting processing, what developers often call dead letter queues or processing queues, the logic requires transmitting a subsequent delete request to the DL queue's endpoint.
So the PATCH turns it off and the delete clears the pipe.
Exactly. This specifically targets and destroys incomplete executions, so the in-flight data never reaches its unauthorized destination.
Okay, what about Microsoft Power Automate? We spent a lot of time discussing how users bypass the native DLP there. How do we kill those evasive flows programmatically when we find them?
For Microsoft Power Automate, the audit engine must utilize the Power Automate management connector. The operator's script executes a turn-off flow action, or it calls the cancel flow run REST endpoint, specifically targeting the unique instance ID you've identified as rogue.
So the minute the audit engine flags an anomaly, say, it detects a brand new webhook pointing to a personal Notion board that has access to the customer table, the kill switch script automatically fires off the patch or delete request.
Automatically, yes.
The pipeline is severed, the data hemorrhage stops instantly. It's not like the dramatic movie scene where someone drops a concrete blast door over a breach. It's much more precise. It's like selectively cutting the power line to one specific unauthorized machine in a massive factory without shutting down the rest of the manufacturing floor.
That's a great way to put it. It is surgical, immediate, and programmatic. And that level of absolute instantaneous control over the authorization registry is the only way an enterprise can survive the current regulatory environment. The programmatic kill switch severs the unauthorized access instantly without waiting for manual human intervention, which is critical when data can be exfiltrated in milliseconds.
This level of technical control is incredible. But security operators don't work in a vacuum. A CISO answers to a board of directors, a CEO, and a CFO. And let's be honest, those executives don't care about PAT TCH requests or JSON payloads.
Not at all.
They need to understand the financial value of this work. If we are going to implement this architecture, we need to provide a framework for CISOs to report audit successes to the board and create a concise summary for CISOs to present the audit ROI, the return on investment, to those board members.
This is a vital translation step. Security software pricing traditionally suffers from extreme bloat, and the reporting metrics are often entirely misaligned with actual business goals. When presenting to the board, you must completely abandon technical metrics.
So no talking about API endpoints.
Exactly. Do not walk into a boardroom and say, we patched 400 vulnerabilities, or we blocked 10,000 malformed packets. The board does not know how to value that. You must structure the reporting around two concepts: capital leakage identified and DPDP penalty exposure averted.
DPDP penalty exposure averted. I love that framing. That is the exact language the board speaks. It translates risk into currency.
Yes. The commercial model for this type of security needs to shift away from traditional per-seat licensing or data volume processing fees. It should be viewed as a compliance investment that strictly scales with the volume of rogue pipelines severed. You build a risk-quantified dashboard for the board members.
And what does that dashboard show?
This dashboard translates the severed connections directly into averted legal fines. The mathematics validate the expense of the audit program immediately.
Let me give an example of how this concise summary would sound in a real boardroom presentation. You walk in, you pull up the risk-quantified dashboard, and you say, "Members of the board, yesterday afternoon, our automated API audit identified an unauthorized webhook. A marketing employee had inadvertently piped highly regulated patient data to a public, unvetted AI summarization server."
A very real scenario.
Within seconds of detection, our system executed a programmatic kill switch, destroying the OAuth token and severing the flow. Under the DPDP Act Schedule, Item 1, that specific data exposure carried a maximum penalty of 250 crore. By identifying and severing that single connection automatically, our security team preemptively avoided a potential 250 crore regulatory fine.
Identifying and terminating just that one unauthorized webhook mathematically justifies the entire annual budget of the API governance program. Operators must identify the capital leakage and demonstrate how severing the unauthorized access protects the balance sheet.
Think about how empowering this is for the security team. Historically, security is viewed as a massive cost center, a black hole where budget goes and nothing tangible comes back. But this framework changes the narrative entirely. It changes the message from, "we are a cost center asking for more money," to, "we literally just saved the company from regulatory bankruptcy today."
Security demands absolute, verifiable control over the authorization registry. And when you can mathematically prove you have that control and quantify the specific financial risk you've mitigated, you change the conversation in the boardroom entirely. You elevate security from an IT operational function to a core component of enterprise risk management.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We've pulled you from the deeply technical weeds of REST API payloads, JSON structures, and OAuth refresh tokens, all the way back up to the massive strategic and financial picture in the corporate boardroom. Let's recap the core thesis of this deep dive into shadow pipelines.
The fundamental truth that operators must accept is that the traditional network perimeter is dead. It is no longer the primary battlefield.
It's just an empty hallway.
Exactly. Low-code, no-code shadow pipelines built by non-technical employees are the new attack surface. The traffic moves cloud to cloud, completely bypassing legacy firewalls and proxies. And the DPDP Act fines for the data exposures these pipelines create are catastrophic and imminent.
Especially with that Phase 2 deadline coming in November 2026.
Therefore, continuous programmatic API token registry auditing is the only viable survival strategy for a modern enterprise.
Obscurity breeds vulnerability. If you do not have a programmatic way to know exactly who holds a permanent, authenticated key to your corporate data, you are already compromised. You just haven't received the extortion email yet. But those operators who build the tools to audit their API registries today will be the ones who survive the regulatory audits of tomorrow.
It all comes back to restorative engineering, using deep technical insight to restore control to the operator, ensuring the data only flows exactly where it is authorized to flow.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought that builds on the source text we've discussed today. We've spent this entire deep dive talking about how to build technical X-ray vision, how to audit registries, and how to execute automated kill switches to stop employees from doing this. But ask yourself this fundamental question. If your non-technical employees, your marketers, your HR coordinators, your sales reps, are willing to bypass your company's entire multi-million-dollar security infrastructure just to make their daily tasks slightly more efficient, what does that say about the usability of the enterprise tools you are officially providing them?
That is a profoundly vital question. We have to look at the human element here. Are these employees acting maliciously? No. They are acting out of absolute desperation.
Because the approved corporate workflows are archaic, heavily frictional, and demand hours of manual data entry. Is the ultimate long-term security fix actually just better user experience? If the approved enterprise CRM didn't require 3 hours of copying and pasting to update a lead list, the marketing intern in Nagpur would never have gone looking for a freemium Zapier account in the first place. Good security has to align with how humans actually work. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We strongly encourage you to go back to your desk today, pull up your architecture diagrams, and seriously question your own data perimeters. Are you spending millions guarding a bank vault while a pneumatic tube silently hums right beneath your feet? We'll see you next time.